Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is Victor Shi. It is Thursday, February 23rd. This week has not been a slow week when it comes to the legal developments into the numerous investigations facing Trump. On the federal level, we learned yesterday that Jack Smith subpoenaed both Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner for their role in the January 6th insurrection. We recently learned that federal prosecutors working with the Mar-a-Lago documents case have pierced attorney-client privilege and are now seeking testimony from Trump's lawyers, which is rather rare. On the state and local levels, we saw some interesting remarks from the forewoman for the Georgia grand jury, who didn't necessarily say anything new, but she did stir the pot a little bit and get our hopes up by saying that the indictment list is not short and that there won't be any surprises. And of course, there are other Trump investigations in New York, and there's one that E. Jean Carroll has brought against him. But the burning question I think all of us have is, will this be the time that Trump finally gets held accountable? And if so, when can we see it, given we've waited so long? I don't have any clear answers, but I am very lucky to have with me today Katie Phang to help us understand what we've been seeing on the legal front. As many of you know, Katie is the host of the Katie Phang Show, which is now airing every Saturday and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And she is also an MSNBC legal analyst and someone who just helps us stay informed about all the legal news of the day. And so I'm very grateful to have you here with us, Katie. Thanks so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me. I wish I could say that I have this amazing crystal ball and that on your podcast right now that I'm going to have all the answers. I don't. Unfortunately, it's the judicial system / human nature / the federal prosecution process is kind of the long answer. But I think that the tea leaves do militate towards an indictment very soon from at least Fani Willis in Fulton County. Yeah. But I think from Jack Smith, I think we've seen an acceleration of movement by Jack Smith that's hard to ignore.
Mm-hmm. So we have no crystal ball, but at least we can hopefully make sense of some of what they're doing. And I want to start off with Jack Smith because yesterday he subpoenaed both Jared and Ivanka. Last week, Mark Meadows got subpoenaed, and the week before, Mike Pence got subpoenaed. I'm wondering how you see these subpoenas and how significant these are and what it tells you about the pace and progress of his investigation.
Well, if you follow the traditional theory that you start from the bottom and you work your way up vis-a-vis power food chains and any type of conspiracy and or investigation into a criminal offense, then it just seems likely that the closer to the center of power you get, the higher up in terms of leadership and potential witnesses in terms of their leadership you get. Yeah. And so it is not some type of huge rocket science analysis to think, well, the next people that are closest to Donald Trump, assuming arguendo he's your ultimate target. Because I always try to caution people when we talk about this stuff, Victor. Prosecutors, yes, are working towards getting a particular target, but also prosecutors are not going to ignore criminality when it's presented to them. And so, if there's evidence of further criminality by Mark Meadows, for example, maybe even Mike Pence, which is less likely, but maybe how about Jared Kushner? I mean, there are things that if they stumble upon, I believe they're obligated to have to pursue. But if you're focusing on the primary target, that being Donald Trump, then it's only logical that if you're trying to speak to Mike Pence, Mark Meadows, his daughter, his son-in-law, then clearly what are you highlighting? And then if you also look at the inexact science of looking at the stupidity that Trump puts out on Truth Social, et cetera, the level of frenetic panic shit that comes out from him, pardon my French, kind of gels with this idea that maybe he knows or his lawyers know or somebody's kind of giving him some insight that maybe like the noose is tightening. And so because of that, I think that it is a good and positive sign. God, this phone's driving me nuts because I keep on dropping. But I will say this though, Victor, and again, I always want to manage people's expectations because that's really the biggest risk, right?
Yeah.
I had this great conversation yesterday about why are we so impatient about not seeing accountability and justice as it's usually defined. And practicing medicine without a license, I said, this was to Fred Wellman. I said, you know what, Fred? It's because when we're raised in the right and proper way, you do something wrong, you expect an immediate consequence. You don't expect a consequence 3 years down the road for when you go and you shoplift at the store, right? You and I know this, right? You do something wrong, you're immediately punished, and there's a consequence for your wrongdoing. People are getting exasperated. But in the management of people's expectations, that old adage from The Wire is true, right? If you shoot for the king, you best not miss. You got to make sure It doesn't have to be airtight, but it better be about damn good as you can get. But I share people's concerns. Does that mean that if Mike Pence does a combo executive privilege and or speech and debate clause and he drags it to the court system, are we ever going to see Mike Pence? Does that mean we're never going to see something from Jack Smith? And I would offer to you, no, we're going to get something. It's just maybe going to take a little bit longer. But I predict, you can mark my words, you can bookmark this, Victor.
Yeah.
You will see a Fulton County DA indictment before the end of the summer, and you will see a Mar-a-Lago documents indictment from Jack Smith in 2023. Period.
Wow. Very, very interesting. So let's shift gears maybe to Georgia, because this week we saw the foreperson for the grand jury say that there would be multiple indictments and that list would not be short. There's been a lot of talk about how this foreperson is maybe at best doing something unnecessary and at worst is dangerous. What should we make of what the foreperson told us earlier this week?
I want to reassure people that from a legal standpoint, you may not like, and maybe you're of the company that you were totally fine with what she said. Yeah. You may not like what she did, but from a legal standpoint, she didn't jeopardize an indictment that comes out of Fulton County. So for those of you that might be worried, it's okay. I also just want to say from a legal standpoint, Donald Trump, when indicted, not if, when, is always going to challenge the indictment. And he'll raise various grounds for purposes of trying to dismiss the indictment, some of which will be this woman, the Emily, I can't pronounce her last name, the forewoman.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be grounds, because this special grand jury is not the grand jury that issues indictments or returns true bills. That's not this grand jury. This grand jury took evidence, listened to witnesses, reviewed evidence to be able to make ultimate recommendations. In fact, you may see a recommendation from the special grand jury of 15 indictments, and Fani Willis and the subsequent grand jury that's going to be impaneled in the first week of March that does issue indictments may end up with 2. It's not gospel. There's no legal requirement that they actually mirror in terms of recommended indictments and what ultimately is issued.
So
all
I have
that
a question.
Being said, though, I don't know about you, but I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't comfortable as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, just as a person.
Yeah.
I wasn't comfortable with the media tour that Emily did, the forewoman. And I've been very honest, Victor, about, am I being too judgmental? Meaning, if the presentation had been less giddy, if it had been less ha ha ha, if it had been a little bit more serious, would I have been more comfortable? Maybe, if we're being honest. But I wasn't. I cringed. Yeah. I physically cringed when I was listening to her, because I was like, boy, you were elected by your other grand jury members to serve in this capacity. It doesn't mean she wasn't serious when she did her work. But if she's the mouthpiece, because you notice none of the other ones have spoken out and done media. None of the other members of this grand jury have spoken to the media yet. So if you're the other sitting members of this grand jury, I know they've been dismissed by now, are you uncomfortable too with the fact that she's representing kind of the work that was done by your grand jury? I don't know.
Yeah, I think presentation does matter. And there was something about the presentation where she did seem giddy and I mean, rejoiced in the fact that she was bringing this news, but it did seem a little bit unnecessary. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really quite know the impacts of this on maybe what Fani Willis does or her decisions. But I'm wondering, in terms of Fani Willis and the indictments that she might bring, what does that look like once she brings indictments, let's say for Donald Trump or other people? What does that look like after that moment?
So once the indictments are returned and the process begins, it's supposed to be just like if it was any other criminal defendant. But you and I both know there is the inevitable circus sideshow that ends up being the litigation of an issue or a case in the court of public opinion. Yeah. We did see, if you'll take the time machine back a little bit, we saw some type of proactivity in Roger Stone's case, for example, when there were gag orders in place and there were limitations by which, defendants and the government included could say stuff about what was going on. But in this instance, you would see the entry of a plea of guilty or not guilty, obviously going to be not guilty. And you'll see the process play out. The defendant is arraigned, hearing dates are set, a trial date is set. I mean, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. He may be the former president of the United States, But once he's indicted, he is a felony criminal defendant, maybe a co-defendant with other people, and he proceeds along just like everybody else has to in the criminal justice system in Georgia.
Oh, I hope that comes eminently. Like Fannie Willis said, we can't possibly get through all the cases today, but I do want to quickly switch gears to talk a little bit about Fox News. You're obviously not there, but you are in the cable news industry. So I was hoping you can shed light on this new Dominion lawsuit. They're seeking $1.6 billion in damages against Fox for defamation. First, I'm wondering, do you think they're going to get that? And second, if Fox does pay all of that, how damaging do you think that will be for the network?
So to start with your last question, media reports that there's about $4 billion cash on hand for Fox. So if Dominion prevails and gets at least $1.6 billion, it's a pretty decent chunk eating into cash on hand. Doesn't mean that they can't liquidate other assets that they may hold to be able to continue. But I think it's more the symbolic victory of a win by Dominion against Fox and the appropriate chilling effect that results on companies like Fox, the now defunct OAN, et cetera, right? This idea that you should be punished and not rewarded financially for perpetrating a lie, perpetuating a lie, and putting into public consumption a lie. It is a defamation lawsuit, and typically these are so hard to win when you're suing the media. But in this particular instance, and you can ask any legal analyst worth their salt that's willing to tell the truth, that's not like on Fox News or something. This is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, defamation lawsuits in terms of actual evidence of actual malice that we've seen. Why? Because you see that from the top all the way down, they knew it was a lie and they continue to put it out there for their viewers. I think the problem we have is, why didn't they settle until now, which I still think they should settle, but now the damage is done. And I think they want to be able to point to a jury and say, the jury got it wrong. We didn't do anything wrong, because if not, they're going to have to tell their viewers that they lied to their viewers this entire time, that they've been duping their viewers, because you and I both know they haven't gone on their shows and explained away the text messages.
No. And one of the things I'm completely concerned about, and we saw earlier this week, is Kevin McCarthy now also giving Tucker Carlson only these tapes of January 6th footage, and then that combined with what he's done and Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity did about the 2020 election. I'm wondering if you think that there's anything that will bring these people back to a sense of reality or truth, and whether or not their audience will believe them, or do you think they've been duped into all these basically lies and conspiracy theories at this point?
I think there's a certain psychology that I can't necessarily explain other than positing this theory, which is we all want to have a sense of belonging. We want to have a sense of community. We want to be able to be with people that share our values. And there's a few things that came out of the Trump administration. One, I always ask this question and I get varying answers. Were people always this racist, and were they always this horrible? And they were just being polite in public and in society. And then they waited for Donald Trump to open the dam. And they said, oh, okay, if the president of the United States can be this horrible, then it's okay for me to be this horrible. Or was there really some indoctrination cult-wise that happens because of Donald Trump? I think the answer is probably a combination of both. But I think the problem that we have is there has been no failure by people like you, people like me, our various platforms. We've been trying to get the truth out. I tell people I traffic, especially as a former prosecutor and trial lawyer. My currency is facts, evidence, and truth. And that is what we're trafficking in. Fox News traffics in lies. It's like they're like a drug dealer, right?
Yeah.
Drug dealer wants to sell you the drugs. They're going to peddle you the drugs because they want you to buy the drugs. That's exactly what they're doing with their viewers. They want their viewers to take the misinformation, take the disinformation, take the falsehoods, and be able to put them out for public consumption. And they're doing it because they want the money. They don't care about the consequences that result. They don't care about the 1-6 stuff. Kevin McCarthy has given that information to Tucker Carlson at Fox News. You and I both know there's going to be some selective editing and splicing that's going to happen, and that's just going to be shoveled to the people that are watching Fox News. But then there's also this slew of people, Victor, that still believe that Antifa was responsible with Nancy Pelosi for January 6th. No matter how many people plead guilty and are prosecuted and say Donald Trump is the person who unleashed the mob, as we see in the Proud Boys sedition trial right now for seditious conspiracy, people are still going to believe it. It's like you have to deprogram that.
Yeah.
You really do.
I mean, is there any way to I mean, you said, I mean, I like to think too that we operate from a place of facts, truth, and evidence, and they just don't. And is there any way that we can reach that audience, or are they gone?
I think they're still reachable, but I also think, kind of getting back to the Dominion voting lawsuit,
Yeah.
I think there has to be consequence, and consequent has to
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
the FCC, Congress, people that say, kind of like, I use this as an example. When you're a police department and you are investigated for civil rights violations because you have a pattern and practice of bad behavior, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The DOJ enters a consent order where you are monitored. You have to show that you are improving policies and procedures, that you're not violating people's civil rights, etc. I know this sounds crazy because of the First Amendment, but I think people need to monitor entities like Fox News. I
Hmm.
think there has to
Hmm.
be oversight for why? Because it is no longer a news source. It's an opinion
Yeah.
source. It's a
Yeah.
propaganda source. It's a government state run source, like being in Russia,
Yeah.
right? That's exactly what they were for the Trump administration. They continue to do so. And so I think that there has to be a level of oversight. And I know it flies in the face, Victor, of First Amendment and the freedom of speech, but this has transcended that. This is
Yeah.
not just, I'm expressing my opinion. This is, I know it's a lie. I'm going to put it out there, and I'm going to result in the storming of a United States Capitol or the physical harm to people. There also has to be
Right.
accountability. If God forbid something happens after this data is released to Fox News, and God forbid somebody's physically harmed, I think there has to be accountability all the way up for the release of that information. I really do.
And Asha Rangappa, she also tweeted this great thing last week, and she was saying, why is Fox News still being displayed in military bases and to the military? And it's a good question. I mean, it's like you have a network that completely is untethered from facts and lies or facts and truth, and just lies to their audience. And there has to be some form of accountability, and hopefully we can deprogram that from showing it to the military. But before I let you go, I want to, can you tell us about your show? I know it went through some programming changes last week. Tell us about your show and where our audience can now find you.
Oh, that's so nice for you to ask. So the only programming change was the time. We
Mhm.
went from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. The Katie Phang Show,
Makes a
MSNBC
difference.
Sunday, 8 a.m. It's still the first live show on
Mhm.
MSNBC on the weekends, but we're also geared to cover any breaking news that occurs prior to 8 a.m. Contrary to what people think, I did not get an extra hour of sleep. I still get up at 2 a.m. on
Oh
Saturday
my
and Sunday
gosh.
to do this TV show.
Wow.
But for me, it's like this. It's have a conversation with a friend. It's
Yeah.
making sure that I get the person who can speak the most intelligently about a subject, or maybe the person who's lived the segment and the topic of that segment. That's important to me. And I also think we have to be just as loud, and we have to take up
Yeah.
just as much space as the other side, because of
Yeah.
that information kind of black hole of truth that's happening on the
Mhm.
other side. I think we got to make sure that we actually keep on it, and we can't get too tired, and we can't get fatigued and suffer from this exhaustion of fighting back, because I do think it's important that the right information and the truth gets out.
Yeah. And you do it so well. And all the while, you represent the AAPI community so well. So, Katie Phang, thank you so much for joining us and helping make sense of all of the legal developments of this weekend and the day.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Katie. That was such an interesting episode with Katie Phang, and please do check out her show, The Katie Phang Show, which is on every Saturday and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. She really does such a good job of bringing us the news, and I didn't know that she gets up at 2 a.m., which is I don't think I've ever got up at 2 a.m. I've definitely stayed up until 2 a.m. though. But please do check that out. It's every Saturday and Sunday, 8 a.m. Before I let you all go, we do have some news of the day. First of all, yesterday there was some tragic and heartbreaking news out of Orlando, Florida. 3 people were dead, one of which included a TV reporter, another 9-year-old, and one other person. And it was just devastating. This comes at a time when Ron DeSantis wants to allow permitless carry in the state of Florida. Florida. There was a really touching video yesterday from one of the TV reporter who died, her colleague, and she basically was saying, we don't have to live like this. This is heartbreaking. We should not have to be in this world and have to fear whether or not this is our reality. And it's so true for young people, especially, and just all of us. Going to the grocery store, going, to our favorite festival, going to a parade. Heck, even just standing on the street, it's just such a scary reality. And this, we can't accept this as our normal. We cannot become numb to this. We have to keep pushing back. And come 2024, that's really our moment to choose what we want our reality to be. Vote people like Ron DeSantis and other Republicans who refuse to make our lives safer out of office. I think that's the only way they're going to learn. And so pay attention, stay vigilant about what's going on in your state, in your community, on the federal level. Pay attention to your elected officials because they really do make a big difference. And they're literally preventing gun violence from happening. At least Republicans are. So pay attention to them. And then in 2024, we all have an opportune moment to vote them out. Yesterday, there was some really interesting news out of East Palestine, Ohio. First of all, Trump visited East Palestine, Ohio, and he, during that visit, was tossing out "Make America Great Again" hats. He was spouting, claims about his water and offering his water. I mean, this is just classic grifter activity. And, while it's laughable, I don't think any of us should forget that this was a president who, during his administration, rolled back key Obama era EPA policies that would have required, for instance, trains to have enhanced braking systems. I mean, these are things that if President Trump hadn't done during his time in office, we might have not even had something like East Palestine. So for Trump to go to East Palestine and pretend like everything is okay, and for him to pretend like he did nothing and he's just going there to help, it's really just absurd and also revolting, considering that a lot of the things that happened in East Palestine really, could have been because of him and what his administration did to roll back really important EPA policies. And so it just is a slap on the face for everyone in that area. And last night, Michael Reagan, who heads the EPA, gave a very, very scathing remark to those at Norfolk Southern, and he said, "I don't have any questions for the CEO. I just have some orders." And then he gave some orders. It was a really strong town hall. It was aired on CNN. So if you haven't watched that, I know there are clips on Twitter and elsewhere. So check that out, because it was a really good kind of contrast and actually what a leader does. He does not promote his water or his "Make America Great Again" hats. So we'll see what happens there. Just really sending our strength and our well wishes to those in East Palestine, and also demanding answers now from the Norfolk Southern people and making sure that accountability does happen. That's all the time that we have for today. I will be back tomorrow, Friday, which it's the end of the week, with Jojo from Jers, who is very, very big on Twitter. You don't want to miss that. We'll be back at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. You don't want to miss that. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss an episode. And I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your Thursday.